by the bed?
Yes, sir.
You see that furniture they bought from Jordan Marsh? What the hell do they let the reporters in there for? Are they crazy up there? Now you know what's going to do. Any congressman's going to get up and say, Christ, if they can throw $5,000 away on this, let's cut them another $1 billion. You can thank the Air Force budget. You're crazy up there. Are they crazy? That silly bastard with his picture next to the bed?
Appalled, but,
Well, I'm appalled, too. Now, the thing of the matter is, I'm going to get that furniture. I just told Sylvester, you can talk to him. I want to find out who paid for that furniture, because I want it to go back to George Martin.
all right, sir.
Then I want that fella's incompetent who had his picture taken next to Mrs. Kennedy's bed, if that's what it is. I mean, he's a silly bastard. I wouldn't have him running a cat house. And that Colonel Carlson, who let in Larry Newman and those reporters, is he crazy too? Christ, they're not all incompetent. Is that the way they're throwing money around over there? You better look into it, and especially when you told me that they hadn't spent a cent.
Well, sir, this is obviously...
Well, this is obviously a fuck-up.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Right.
Hello.
Mr. President, Mr. J. Edgar Hoover, return your call.
Hello. Yes, Mr. President. Hi, Edgar. Fine, thank you. I was doing a little thinking last night, and you notice where this clown Harrison Williams is saying that he said that we were Trios was blocking an attempt to let the FBI go in and do help out.
Yes,
and of course, we answered that. Kleindienst answered, and we answered here. And of course, you know the directive in November covers that. And I also saw your letter, which indicated, my God, in New York, you're practically running the thing.
They all?
Well, which is good. I mean, you're running it.
You see, Mr. President, in all of the killings of police officers, as I pointed out, I think, in a recent memorandum to you, the local police, within 30 days, apprehend 96.5%.
It's just one thing where we aren't needed. Here's what I had in mind, and now let me just run this.
Welcome to the Postgame. This is the Michael Brooks Show. Welcome, new patrons. Happy New Year. Happy 2018. Briahna, Joy Gray. Michael Brooks Show crew, thank you. Pleasure to have you.
Pleasure.
First show of the year.
To be here.
We're on the move. Thank you to super producer Matt Leck, head theoretician David Grishcom, and David Slavic, super producer offsite, making it all happen. The Am I Black poll. Midway through, we're getting our answers. The actual poll that I would do is I will totally assert greater non-whiteness than Peter Dow. I will do that. I know. I'm
Peter
just playing.
Dow's half Lebanese.
Get the fuck out of here. He's Christian Lebanese. That shit. See, that's where. That's where this whole like Islam isn't a race, so you can't be bigoted against Muslims because it's not a race. This is where the thing blows apart, because the truth of the matter is, I have no doubt that if Peter Dow if he represented and was like name-wise like Muslim Lebanese, he would have had a slightly different experience, no doubt.
I have, Arab Christian friends who identify.
Well, but they look brown.
Mostly like my very close friend, she just looks Jewish. Like a lot of people thought she was Jewish.
Well, I don't think
in law
people
school.
are super into Jews either.
Okay.
I mean, Jews are like by far the most privileged amongst unprivileged people. You know what I mean? That's kind of like the Jew lane. It's like the way this stuff works. It's like when they get sick, or they've like done like the Trump regime like attack, and like Jews are not first on the list, but it's gonna, like, there is gonna be the day in Trump's third term where he's like, you know what, Jared, I actually didn't really like that Ivanka's a Jew, and we're gonna take the synagogues down, place them with hotels. It's not top priority, but it's coming. That's the thing about it. That's why, like, Jews that would like fuck with this stuff are so stupid, even from like just the self-preservation sense, because there isn't a scenario. There's only one Jewish fascist scenario, and it's called Israel. Postgame, baby. I love that shit. I'm saying it all over a beat too. I don't give a fuck. It is true though.
No
It
one
really
wants me
is.
to run for office. Nobody wants it to happen.
You know what? Bree, you're talking about running for Green Party office anyways. It makes no difference. I could be here talking about UFOs.
Like
You're still not going to
most
clear.
anti-democratic thing. I just don't understand this hang-up of yours.
That's not a hang up. Look,
You love Jabari.
Jabari's running for city council. It's exactly what the Green Party should be doing.
So just know your place.
No. If you listen to Bill Fletcher Jr., you know what? Taken appropriately, yes. Know where your fulcrum point is and where there is actual opportunity to exert actual power, yes.
And that's what they said about Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders did it inside a primary, so it was a bullshit non-operative
Yeah,
argument.
but he ran his whole life as an independent and then did that. The same thing could be said of a Green Party candidate someday.
It could be said someday.
Yeah,
not
someday.
Not for less than 1% of the vote in a
Someday,
fantasy run.
And that's why we can't speak in these absolutist terms. You right now are ponying, hot dogging.
Hot dog.
The Green Party. Patricia Arquette did one of those Hillary Clinton grant everybody a pony thing about healthcare, but she called it hot dogs.
I don't know all this stuff. I thought Patricia
So much has
Arquette.
happened.
I thought she was the chick in Pulp Fiction. It turns out I was wrong.
No, you were wrong about that.
Okay,
That's a
I don't
different
know
Arquette.
who the hell she is.
She's from Medium. Also from Boyhood. Did you watch Boyhood?
No.
That Linklater?
No.
No. All right.
watch
Well,
that
I don't know
shit.
if I can help you.
I watched. You know, wait. This is gonna be super random. But seriously, was Patricia Arquette? Who's the guy who made I Heart Huckabees? What's that director's name? And the movie with Bradley Cooper that just like, what's his name? You don't know I Heart Huckabees? You don't know that movie? The movie with
the David O. Russell is
David
the
O.
director.
Russell made a movie in the 90s, one of his first movies. I think it's called something like Flirting with Disaster. It's a great movie. And look this up. Is Patricia Arquette Ben Stiller's wife in that movie? Because if it is, then I know who she is. I have no idea who she is, but that's a great movie. People should. That's my rec.
And I feel like we should
You
just-
are right. Yep. His wife, Nancy, Patricia Arquette.
Nailed it.
All right. Well,
So she was there, and she did a good movie in the 90s, and now she's tweeting dumb shit.
now she's decided that she's super anti-Sanders, although she claims like a lot of people that she voted for him in the primary, but suddenly she finds him to be completely unconscionable and doesn't like that he promises everybody quote unquote free stuff, and including like
Wow.
hot dogs and bubble gum.
That's a lot of balls for some fucking broad who does make believe for a living and is a millionaire.
But here's the thing that I don't love that criticism either.
I know. That's why I said it.
I don't.
I know.
Like, the problem isn't that she's, an actress. The problem isn't that she's rich
Problem
and
she's
white
wrong.
and living in California. Because people will say the same thing of a number of actors with good politics who are also rich and white and live in California. That's not the issue.
Right.
The issue is that she said something that's foolish.
No, I agree.
That's
Although I
motivated by spite.
I do think actually though, I'm not even talking about her gender or her. I mean, I joke. I will jibe about her wealth because I do think it's disgusting for any rich person to say like, "Oh, healthcare is ponies."
Sure.
I think that's just a disgusting moral statement. Period. But I don't know. I think like it's just a very funny. Like, if some like finance dweeb who doesn't have any imagination says like, oh, your like ambition isn't realistic, but it is weird to me that somebody who makes a living with some sense of like, you actually can do a lot of things with like ideas that aren't, quote unquote rationally acceptable or whatever. It's just it's a weird line of attack. It's like I literally am in a $1 trillion industry built on make believe that actually turns into money and real products and serious human effort. And my big response to your politics is like, it's a pony. It's just it sounds weird to me.
I mean, I would argue that the finance guy is similarly familiar with immaterial,
no shit.
fantastic
Exactly.
things made out of air.
Exactly. That's the truth. Let's take a phone call, then we'll get to the fact that the world might end before we figure out Jill Stein. And when you catch up, I did a great bit about Jill Stein negotiating with the Russians.
Can't wait.
I wish she was like that. If Jill Stein turns out that she was literally just like a Trojan for Russian money and she was doing all this for like points on Gazprom, my approval rating for her will skyrocket. You are calling from a 404 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Oh, no, it's me, isn't it? Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you great. What's up?
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, it's Josh, one of the Joshes. I live in Atlanta. I don't call that frequently, though, so I'm not one of the cool ones.
No,
I don't know. I kind of
cool.
had like a whole thing. Oh, no, yeah, go ahead.
No, I said you're cool. Go ahead, man. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I had like a whole thing. I was super ready for the Green Party debate. Now I'm kind of feeling like, I want to trash them, though, because I like it. But I just kind of had like 2.5 points. One was like, my problem with the Green Party, and I guess it's really just a problem with Jill Stein, was like, it kind of goes back to when Sam asked her that question at the town hall
Right.
back during the election. And it's just like, come on, like you need.
Well, explain the question
fact
for
that
people. I don't think definitely not everybody listening or watching has heard that question. So just explain that a little bit.
Okay, sure. So basically his question, I don't remember exactly, but I'm paraphrasing. It was here, what is your plan for like building the party down ballot? And specifically, I think he was talking about like, if you get like the matching funds from reaching like 5% of the vote, like what's your plan for building the party? And it was like an abysmal answer. It was, she was like,
it was a magical. It was like people will come out and vote and they follow their conscience. Yes, I remember. She had no operational answer. Yes, I remember that.
And I'm thinking like, the Green Party, like, as a group that should have some infrastructure, but they didn't have, the fact they didn't have a plan for their national figure to articulate, like that doesn't, because, even if she doesn't come up with it, she doesn't have to be the smartest person, as long as like they have like, here's what you need, the message you need to get out for our down ballot candidates while you're running. And it's like, why didn't you have that?
Because they're really not. Well, I have a more limited electoral critique of the Greens, and then I actually have just like a broader critique of why people think that these things can happen through these kind of like third party efforts. But with like global examples of like what do Green parties actually look like when they acquire power, which is like a whole other thing. So, but at any rate, I just, there's zero evidence to me, and I actually mean like this, I'm framing it polemically, but it's like, this is actually legitimately a question. There's zero evidence to me that like, even if I was to accept a very idealized, like they shouldn't have to answer or justify any of this, it's just like their right to practice in democracy, and anything that criticizes that is like anti-democratic. I hear snippets. I thought Jabari had but I have certainly never heard from Jill Stein or any other figure in the Green Party anything approximating a strategic approach to influencing and exercising power outside of maybe we'll get federally matching funds. And I'm framing it polemically, but honestly, like, is that wrong? Are there things I haven't heard?
I mean, I'm not, an authority on, Green Party messaging. But what I do know is that this critique.
Sorry, please.
What I do know, so this critique is identical to a critique that I continue to hear about Bernie Sanders. And I just don't see the difference. Just yesterday, day before yesterday, I'm entangled with someone on Twitter who's making the exact same argument about how, in the course of this Patricia Arquette business, in fact, about how it in fact is hot dogs and puppies and rainbows, because there is no plan for how to fund Medicare for all. And we know that there's plans that are circulating, but it was an intentionally funding was not included in the proposed Medicare for all bill. There is an argument that can be made that there is not a concrete plan for funding. And what the response usually is from the Bernie crowd is that where there's a will, there's a way. And the issue is not actually the ability to fund, but the political will to fund. We obviously write checks for $70 billion military expansions and all these other kinds of things, the tax bill, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all just a pretext. But somehow, when it comes to a campaign like the Green Party's campaign and Jill Stein's campaign, which is even more attenuated and even more distanced from the real work of like no one actually thinks Jill Stein's going to win, to the extent that Bernie Sanders said things like, I didn't campaign well in the South because it wasn't about, I didn't actually think I was going to have this much traction and ability to actually win the election. And we understand that. And we don't say, oh, it's because he was racist and didn't care about black votes in the South or any of these other things that centrists say. We understand that there are ways in which his campaign manifested that had to do with what his goals were, and those goals not being actually electoral victory until it was too late, right? Until he realized, oh, actually, I could win this, right? Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, and we understand those justifications for Bernie Sanders, I don't understand why someone like Jill Stein, who's, kind of counted a victory if she wins 5%, 3% of the vote, why we have these high expectations of her to be able to account for down ballot races.
Do you want to say, I'm going to let you go in a second, but I guess, go ahead, respond if you have a thought, and then I'll respond, but go ahead.
No, and I think my thing about that is, like, I don't even, like, for the Green New Deal, for instance, I don't even think she needs to articulate a full-on plan for, like, the policy, honestly. I don't think that's necessary. I think, though, if we really want to be about, like, actually helping people and doing things for people, we have to first and foremost talk about how to win. Like, I think it is incumbent on us to talk about how to win. And I think the difference with Sanders is like, in terms of actually grabbing power, well, first of all, he was just more successful at it. I mean, it's clear now. He's got, Cory Booker talking about Medicare for all and what. Like, if he didn't need to necessarily articulate as much of a plan because he already was at a point where he could actually grab it. Like, he's there. And I don't need an answer how you're going to fund Medicare for all. I don't need an answer how you're going to do the Green New Deal. But if you're the Green Party, I think you need to articulate, and it doesn't need to be super specific. It doesn't even necessarily need to be that good, but I think you need a decent answer, and you need to see how you're going to carve out some power in the short term and the long term. I do want to see that from them. Well, the policy, mm-hmm. I don't think it's that up in the air to say we're going to have a Green New Deal, but I think it's up in the air to say we're just going to win this because we're going to win. And the contrast, I look at stuff that the DSA is doing.
Yeah, no, totally.
Where they're doing.
Well, first of all, I guess, look, why don't you respond to what he just said, and then I'll articulate.
I would just say the message that I got very clearly was that the goal, in the same way that Bernie Sanders' almost nearly explicit goal was not to win, but to advance a certain political agenda and shift Hillary to the left. The stated goal of Jill Stein's campaign was to get to 5%, to get the Green Party funding because of the admission that they aren't able to do very much. They aren't able to field credible candidates, et cetera, because they have nothing in their bank account. And so to me, the getting to 5% was an end in of itself in terms of addressing some of the deeper concerns that you have about what they're going to do to be more credible down the line. And to be sold more readily to a broader population and have more of a chance of actually achieving office. That was enough for me, given how small the Green Party is and how little support that they have compared to someone like Bernie Sanders who's going to run on a major party ticket.
Thanks for the call, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
I mean, look, let's we'll get to this. Jesus Christ, we'll get to this much more important thing in a second. But I think that.
Oh my God.
You gotta open another tab, because if that's hanging over us, we're like, this is like debating like just fucking nonsense while the world might end. But I think that so I think, okay, my problem is actually threefold, and I think part of this is actually relevant for our current predicament. So one is, I think, like, some of what you're saying is that same flattening effect that we were talking about earlier. Like, things can be on a continuum, but they're radically different things. So one, just out of the gate, the implications of running inside a Democratic primary, there's zero downside. There's no downside to go into the literally. There's none.
There's no downside.
No, let me explain. Okay. So there's no downside in going into the party, try to win. I think Bernie made I agree. I think if Bernie actually had started a year earlier, I think he might actually won. The downside, I mean, and look, I don't want to go over like the minutia, and I totally agree that centrists completely overstate the impact she had in the election. But the reality is that if you run as a third party in our system as is constituted, which is not parliamentary, it's not coalition, it's raw vote. And also if you don't say, which is another performative contradiction, because she would occasionally say get to 5%, but she also sometimes, especially in the beginning, and I can't pull this up, but she definitely said like a couple of really loopy things about actually winning the whole thing.
And so did Bernie Sanders, and everyone thought they were really loopy
no.
in December of 2015.
But they're not. It's not.
When he was polling
it's
at
not
2%.
remotely as loopy for a United States senator to say that running in a major party primary as an irrelevant perpetual fail candidate of an irrelevant no office holding third party. But no. Let me finish the point.
Okay.
Let me just finish
I
these.
start to take notes on all of my.
No, I know
points.
you're good. Oh, do you need a
One of
pen?
those ink pens?
Do you need a pen? All right. Jesus, I clearly am a self-repressed lawyer because I argue like they do, which is to say I'm just as annoying as Brie. So do you have a pen? Mm-hmm. Okay. So first, there's a flattening, which is that things can be in a continuum, but they're fundamentally different things. And there is, as soon as you go out in that third-party role, you can contribute to a truly catastrophic outcome, Trump being elected. That's number one. So it's not the same thing. And just like centrists on the flip side who say it's the same thing are being delusional and simply wrong performatively, people who say it's the same thing, like it's just the inverse of a wrong proposition in both ways. The stakes of those runs and how those runs are playing out are fundamentally different. And by the way, they would also even be fundamentally different if, one is that there's infinitely more upside and less risk to run in the Democratic Party. And two, part of it is the reality of different people. Like, if Bernie ran as a Green, which I don't think he should, there would be potentially more upside and way more downside because he would have like a serious effect because he's a United States senator. So I don't think out of the gate you can compare either of them much to begin with because they're just totally different propositions. The second point is that if you're going to run essentially a message campaign, then your message should be great. And she didn't educate people. When I talk with someone like Bill Fletcher, he's talking about power, alliances, how politics actually works, how we build a long-term project. She's just out like, I know Hillary Clinton sucks. Great. That's number two. And then number three, more broadly, I think electoral politics matters a lot. I also think in a broader context of capitalism, I don't know what people think is going, like in order to do the steps that you would need to do to acquire power as a third party, first of all, is to completely overturn election law and all sorts of structural barriers to third parties. But then as soon as you gain power in the configuration we're in, your politics are already going to be greatly impacted by larger structural forces, which are more fundamental to address if you're coming at it from a radical perspective. Like electoral politics should be harm reduction, and then we need radical politics outside of it. So Green parties in Europe in the 80s sounded like Jill Stein. And now where they're in government, they're actually like they're about to have a Jamaica coalition with conservatives in Germany. They've become like Green New Democrats. And if you look more close to home, the Progressive Party in Vermont, which arose out of Bernie Sanders, they are slightly to the left of Democrats and they do some good stuff. But there's a ton of objections to them in Burlington, as an example, where they have a lot of power about in office, their stances on development, their actual alliances with business. So
what's your point there, though?
My point there is that just okay. So my point there.
Are you saying that's a good thing? Or
no,
are you
it's
saying
not.
That's inevitability. Therefore, there's no point in having a leftist party.
No, my point is that if your project is radical transformation, right now, third-party electoral politics is just a weird misuse of energy. Like if you want to inject
that's the part that becomes so anti-democratic.
But that's all abstract. I'm talking in reality. Like what actually would have an impact?
I don't think that democracy is an abstraction. I think that in real life.
I'm talking about democracy, though. I'm not negating democracy.
Well, I'm saying that it's not an abstraction. I think that in real life, if the reality is that when political parties become more possible, that they become more centrist, that they become less revolutionary, that their ability to message and expand and shift the Overton window and expand the scope of what humans and that Americans think is possible for how to live their lives is the exact case for why there always needs to be alternative parties like the Green Party. Because while Bernie Sanders is standing up here saying a lot of great stuff about universal health care, he's also, for reasons that I understand politically but don't agree with personally, coming down hard on reparations when Jill Stein is entertaining lengthy discussions on exactly why reparations are necessary, showing a much more complex understanding of the police state as an extension of slavery. And that's something you said earlier.
But really?
Yeah,
like, is she just, really? But she just has a lot of verbiage. Has she ever? No, I don't know. I know that she, no.
I think that you don't know that because the media did not play that.
I've listened to interviews where she said, I support reparations. But I have never heard her say,
Michael?
What's that is my frustration that if the whole point of your candidacy is push the overturn window and educate.
Like
and
Bernie Sanders,
and you're
before
only,
he accidentally became possible for him to win.
In an only upside context, yes. And in her, which in her case is not true, there's major downside. If your only upshot is that you list off good left-wing positions that we agree with, but don't have any substantive understanding of how politics works. There's nobody.
That's unfair.
I have not met. It is demonstrative. The way she talked about politics as a personal moral exercise, not structural, not alliance building.
I don't think that's fair.
I mean,
and I also don't. And I also don't.
How's it not fair?
I don't think that's a fair characterization of how she talked about politics. I think that she talked about politics in a way that was often structural, if inadequate, obviously, in the same ways that Bernie Sanders talked about politics in a way that was structural and often criticized as inaccurate.
But I'm not trying to interrupt, but I don't mean structural in terms of potentially pointing out some nice left-wing linkages of issues. I mean, literally, and Bernie actually did do a much better job.
I disagree. I've heard Jill Stein give a much better, comprehensive, historical understanding of structural racism and inequity in America than Bernie Sanders.
No, but I'm talking about telling people how to do politics. When you say that what my upshot of this is that you should vote your conscience and that will have some type of innate magical effect. That's not telling people how to do politics.
When it comes to Jill Stein, you characterize it as Jill Stein did not stand up and say it's going to have a magical effect if you vote for me, any more so than Bernie Sanders stood up and said it's going to have a magical effect if you vote for me. No, he said if you
vote for me, I'm going to flip the one of two major parties significantly to the left, and he was demonstrating it in real time.
Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein gave both were exactly the same in terms of speaking as though they could win when they did not believe that they could win. The only difference between Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein is that Bernie Sanders happened to be through some kind of like fluke that was a combination of Hillary Clinton being the most disliked candidate in the world in history, Trump being the second most disliked candidate in history, and coming on top of a populist surge where he was able to get infinitely more traction than he ever believed to be possible. So the fact that Bernie Sanders ended up being a possibility where Jill Stein was not does not actually indicate a substantive difference in their message or their goals, their political goals. No. Furthermore, I think that what you're doing is like kind of grossly mischaracterizing what Jill Stein's argument actually was, which is my biggest beef with how what's happening with her in the media. There was no coverage whatsoever of anything that she said.
But I did. I've listened to her talk. We had her on the show in 2012. I watched Sam ask her this question. I've listened to her on different shows. I've seen her talk. I know her spiel. Even if I'm wrong, that critique just doesn't apply to me.
What I heard from her spiel was persuasive, and I feel like there is actually a significant relevance to the kind of moral agenda making that you kind of poo-pooed just then. I think that is exactly why I supported Bernie Sanders, not because of some policy wonkishness that still has yet to materialize, is because I think it's important to teach people what they can and cannot have. I think what's disappointing about Hillary Clinton, what's dangerous about Hillary Clinton, it's not some personal animosity or because her voice is shrill or even her, bad policy acts in terms of welfare reform or Libya or what have you. The most dangerous thing I think that exists about Hillary Clinton is she taught people that they couldn't have things, that they shouldn't believe in things that are basic rights in other parts of the world. And I think that sidelining or diminishing the importance of that kind of moral message is incredibly dangerous. And if you actually care about the spoiler effect, if your concern is that if you respect the importance of third parties to democracy, but actually have a legitimate concern about ending up with a Donald Trump as president, then every other word out of your mouth needs to be about ranked choice voting and how to actually change the system.
No, but sure, I agree, and that's a long-term project that has nothing to do with her little. No.
I'm not talking about you, but Sam B. Does not have a 15-minute segment on ranked choice voting. What she does is spend half her show talking about how hilarious it is that Jill Stein is in a folk band.
Well, let me tell you.
And Eve Payaster has an article talking about how hilarious it is that Jill Stein doesn't flush your toilet. Like, that's not the conversation. Like,
she doesn't.
It's like environment. Like
Matt, can you do some research for next week? We're gonna do a segment on Jill Stein. That's fucking disgusting. I'm a clean green, but I'm in Green Party parlance from Europe, I'm a Relo, not a fundy. But the thing is that. And like, let's not belabor it. But I just do want to say, I didn't see Sam B's segment, but I did. Like, I ripped in. I thought John Oliver's segment on her was fucking stupid. So again, like, some of the things you're arguing with, you're not arguing with me. There are obviously places we strongly disagree.
Also, the ways,
but the language
that you're using is also co-opted and it's adopted as part of an argument that's just poo-poo Jill Stein.
No, but I have such a but I don't look. Here's my basic thing that just cannot be navigated out of. She spent, and I know she occasionally added some nuance to this, but look, for that campaign to make sense and to be ethical in the current framework of the reality of that choice, she could have easily said, I'm running a 42-state campaign, and here are the specific goals. She didn't do that.
That's what I heard.
And also in addition, I don't agree. I'm not as idealistic. I think that first of all, I think it's a big problem that Hillary limited the moral vision, but actually I have a bigger problem with things that she literally actually did. And I think it's totally a balance in politics between like the poetry and the prose. And I think that not only did Jill Stein not effectively articulate an education of how to actually do politics in a strategic and grounded fashion, she almost like by being like, it's almost like she's like a composite character that like the CIA could create of like silly liberal fecklessness by associating really important issues and moral calls with political illiteracy, delusion, and narcissism. And I agree, by the way, as a last point, I agree that like there were a lot of people who attacked her and some of her treatment was unfair and some of her treatment was sexist. But just like Hillary Clinton, if you're going to run a obscure campaign for a party most people have never heard of and think are like hippie nonsense, well, you got to actually do and perform the opposite of that in your presentation. And there is nothing that she did to contradict that image of her. So at the end of the day, it's like she just toxified a national brand, which if you're more invested in third parties than I am, you should be more pissed at her than anybody else. Because she's not a popular figure and the party's not popular and there's no... When in 2000 they had
Did you prefer Rosa Clemente?
I don't prefer any of them. Ralph Nader is a totally serious person who ran a great campaign. They haven't had anything since. It's true.
Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law.
I don't care about.
Serious.
I don't care.
Jill Stein, Harvard undergrad, Harvard.
He's not.
Like
no. He's not serious because of his degrees. He's serious. He has a greater record of public service accomplishment throughout decades of his career than any. She is not the reason that we have a consumer financial.
Of course not.
So it's not because of his fucking degrees. Come on.
But I think it's absolutely nobody. No similarly situated candidate who was what you said just then about how she just comes off as flaky. That is the problem.
Absolutely does.
She does come off as flaky, but there's a difference between the fact that she has a kind of a winnowy way of talking and doesn't flush her toilet, and the actual words that are coming out of her mouth.
No, I'm talking about the words that come out of her mouth. I've met a million liberal moms in Amherst. They don't have structural understanding of how to win campaigns.
And I think that reflects an actual disconnect between what she's actually said that's influenced by sexism. I do. I had to go and find them myself.
You're playing
because
the same game that centrists play about Hillary.
Game. It's not the same
You're playing
game.
Exactly the same game.
It's not.
You're not defending her on any serious merit, and now it's sexism.
It's a little bit difficult because I have to get a word in edgewise.
Oh, okay.
But the reality of the situation is if you want to listen to a good Jill Stein interview, I would recommend Kristen Savali West interviewed her. It was like embedded in an article that she had written in Huffington Post. But if you just Google Kristen Savali West and Jill Stein interview, that'll come up. And also, actually, speaking of Hari Kondabolu, they did a pretty good interview of her on Politically Reactive, which was interesting because they talked shit about her the entire campaign season and then had her on, and actually they said a lot of the same things that you're saying and then switched their tune after they actually were able to press her on some of these questions and get satisfactory answers that a lot of people actually haven't had.
I listened to that interview. It did not change anything that I thought about her. Also, if you listen to her with Jeremy Scahill, where she called Russia Iran-Contra on crack, and again, had no... I mean, I'm sorry. It's just, look,
if you're
in the context of that campaign, all this dumb shit, Hillary's too big to jail, all this stuff. I'm sorry. It's just, it's counterproductive. It's delusional.
If your straw man is that she's not as good a candidate as Bernie Sanders or Ralph Nader, then that's a straw man because nobody's arguing that. Obviously, that Jill Stein isn't the best candidate in the history of all candidates. The question is, given the limited resources of the Green Party, which you would have persist into perpetuity because you don't want to support the campaign to get them 5% funding,
until
which
they have
would actually enable them to front more serious candidates.
And until
that point, you're going to have to rely on independently wealthy, retired doctors who have good politics, who are going to be willing to set their lives aside and do something like this. That's just the name of the game. You're going to get Jill Stein and Rosa Clemente, and it is what it is.
And she could educate people on how to perform better, I'd support it. But she didn't do that, and I don't. And I really am I'm sorry. Like it's the same. It's the same centrist game to say it's sexism.
It's not.
Is there anybody else in this room that thought that Jill Stein? I know it's a biased room, but just objectively, and also David, you might disagree with me. We haven't talked about this. Did anybody listen to any speech or any interview where Jill Stein elucidated anything about the operational realities of power and long-term organizing and how to actually win something?
Way to define the terms.
No, but that's what I'm talking about.
Did anyone hear a Jill Stein speech where she had,
that's what I'm talking about.
Was a brunette wearing a dark suit and a tie?
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. I understand that she has good, nice left positions.
What I specifically said was I think that there was value in the messaging in the same way that Bernie Sanders' explicit goals prior to it becoming a more political reality that he actually could win was rooted in messaging, and that obviously the Green Party's messaging is going to be even to the left and more whimsical than someone like Bernie Sanders, who is intentionally trying to take advantage of a populist feeling. So he's going to speak to what the he specifically chose those progressive issues that have wide-ranging support, right? There's a reason that he didn't come in favor of reparations, but he did come in favor of universal health care, and it's not because he's like personally opposed to reparations. It's because he knows, and he said explicitly, most people aren't for reparations. So that's fine.
We agreed weeks ago that branding is super important.
And branding is super, but the reality is, if when you are a party that is has no intention of winning, we all can agree that the Green Party is not out there believing they're actually going to win the presidential election. You can't hold people to the same standard. The same way that you can't hold Bernie Sanders.
And in a historical...
I have a question.
Where's Bernie Sanders' plan for funding healthcare? Where is it?
That's a totally different thing. Again, you're flattening. You're flattening.
It's not.
Well,
you're absolutely flattening.
So I admit I paid scant attention to Jill Stein during the election, but I'm curious. I wish I heard more about ranked choice voting, for instance.
Me too.
She never talked. But
was she talking about that enough for you?
Yeah.
No.
She did. She brought up ranked choice voting every single time I heard her bring up, and her campaign released a lot of these circulars that we were retweeting as well and talking about on Swoti podcast about the exact 4-point agenda of 5%. If we get to 5%, this is what we get, and this is how we're going to use it. I'm sorry that I'm not articulate enough to recount it for you right now, but if you go back to my Twitter feed from November, or if you go back, to listen to episode 5 of Swody Pod, we did the breakdown, and it was translation what was coming out of Jill Stein's mouth and her campaign. And the fact that other people didn't hear it because of the media or chose not to internalize it because of lack of exposure and or sexism is not the fault of Jill Stein. Jill Stein can be faulted for a lot of things. Jill Stein can obviously be accused of not running a real campaign because that's true. But I'm talking about
not even an
holding
effective
her
message
to
campaign. No, I hold her to her account, and nobody, including some of the most sophisticated people, like honestly Matt, who does this like literally professionally, should ever need, like I did a lot of the hoops you're laying out, and I still am totally not convinced, but there is no way you could tell anybody approximating like a normal person that in order to get what this person is actually saying, you need to listen to like 50 podcasts.
It's not because you have to listen to 50 podcasts. It's because there was zero media coverage of anything that came out of her mouth.
CNN. She got a town hall
one
at
debate.
CNN.
There was that one town hall, and how many people actually turned into it?
I don't know, but I saw it, and it wasn't impressive at all.
Well, I have to say, like, about that CNN town hall,
Yeah.
like at least we can give this to Jill Stein, is that she did come out and give one of the most coherent and passionate defenses for BDS and criticizing Israel and the
true.
apartheid
That's
state.
absolutely
And that was
true.
very powerful, and that's
Sure.
something that you wouldn't get, from Bernie Sanders either.
And then she had no plan or strategy to do anything about it. But it's cool that she said that on national television. Let's go. We gotta move a little bit because maybe Jill Stein will be safe in Cambridge with her non-flushable toilet, but we are in New York.
That's too much for me.
Yeah. There's a new art. People are still writing. People
Let it mellow. To me,
people are still writing articles about her though.
As
Why?
a hit piece, but to me, like that fact was like, oh, she's actually internally consistent in a way that most people aren't. So to your cynicism argument about
Cynicism
or
argument?
the kind of hypocrisy argument about Ted Cruz and Paul Ryan and the rest of them, how you prefer them to be explicit about their inconsistencies
Right.
or whatever.
I don't care
You
about
can't-
hypocrisy.
She might be self-righteous or whatever.
She's sanctimonious
she might be
and ethical.
sanctimonious, but she's ethical.
But she's not publicly ethical because she helped Trump be president. But besides
which
that,
you know to be fundamentally factually untrue by every conceivable metric, including
She's
the
a-
fact that more Democrats, just like Ralph Nader in Florida in 2000, more Democrats in
That's
these
true.
swing states voted for Trump than
no, that's
independents
totally
who
true.
were not.
Yeah, that's totally true. I know.
obligated to vote for Hillary Clinton.
I totally buy that. Can we get this tweet up? And as much as I sort of hold her in contempt, obviously most Democratic focus on her is just compensation to get away from their failures.
Sexism.
Yeah, but the way you use it against me, you should be in a Peter Dow thread with that bullshit. Get the fuck out of here.
Well, as a woman of color, I know.
Yeah, I know. Oh, now it's time for that shit.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe if your poll results came back better and you were actually voted to be
Oh,
black,
oh,
then you would have
oh,
more leverage
oh,
in this conversation.
oh,
Unfortunately, there's only one woman of color here.
You don't know, I don't care about that. I care
On
about my
stage.
poll results, which are far more important than your already questionable magical credentials. And currently,
Look at my birth certificate.
50. I look at your birth certificate. You didn't support Hillary Clinton, so clearly there's something wrong with your magic. I am at 52% yes, 48% does not matter, which puts me in exactly the right position to say that Jill Stein is a pseudo-intellectual incompetent, and I don't care that she went to Harvard.
I see you're supported by a lot of Leela Dows out there. There's always behind
Never.
every,
Okay, now we got to be
behind
serious.
every Ted Danson
You
and
never,
blackface, there's a
ever,
Whoopi Goldberg.
ever compare my audience to Leela Dow's. That you must
There's
retract.
always somebody.
That you retract.
Behind-
I don't care. You can say
behind
whatever.
every
You could defend whatever idiot
negligibly
candidate you
woke
want, but you never compare my
Macklemore
audience.
figure behind every behind every Ted
Behind
Danson.
every Peter Dow.
Behind every Ted Danson who wears blackface to the Academy Awards is a Whoopi Goldberg who told him it was a good idea.
Wait, hold up. In all seriousness, Ted Danson
That
wore
happened in the
blackface.
90s. Where were you?
I was not aware of
This
that.
100% happens.
That's insane. What year was that? Were we like?
Oh,
were
1990s. We were children.
Yeah, why would we know that?
Because Ted Danson dating Whoopi Goldberg and the fallout of that movie they had where he was like the sperm donor. You know that one?
No.
You know,
Okay,
it's called like American Dad or American something. I don't know.
It's called Ted Danson wore blackface. What the fuck? Okay. Oh my god. Okay, yeah, it definitely played a whole early 90s setup for sure. What is this? This is what? Are you serious?
And also made a similar mistake when he wore blackface for a costume back in the day.
Pause it. Are you serious? That's Ted Danson?
So obviously he's an individual who can make his own decisions, but I just really don't want to lose sight of the fact that it was his girlfriend at the time, Whoopi Goldberg, who co-signed this woman as his
you know what? I'm not the biggest Whoopi fan in the world, but Whoopi strikes me as a smart. I think
she supports Mel Gibson to this day. My good friend Bill O'Reilly, my good friend Mel Gibson.
Well, whatever. I thought she was intentionally trying to sabotage him.
No, I'm trying to replace her in The View. Vote.
So, look at that. How many beers? I like that. Bree definitely had the beer. By the way, Jill Stein is fucking amazing, and I'll see you in The View. Okay, now the world is going to end. Please pull up this tweet. We don't have time to. After Trump nukes Korea, Jill Stein would be like, Hillary would have done it. I'll see you at Whole Foods. Now, you know what? You pulled the bullshit card on me. Now I'm just going to actually do it.
That's I've been out here making weird girly voices at the top of the episode.
Well, that was, wait, which one?
You were talking about like emasculating various GOP people in a way that wasn't necessarily.
Well, I'm hashtag problematic.
None of our gender politics are perfect.
Hashtag problematic.
I'm hashtag here to point it out
as our
hashtag resident woman of color.
You're not the only resident woman of color in this program.
I didn't say I was the only. I'm the only right now on mic though.
Okay, Donald Trump tweeted this out this evening. This is far more important than this squabble. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the, quote, nuclear button is on his desk at all times, unquote. Will someone from his depleted food-starved regime please inform him that I have a nuclear button, and it's much bigger and more powerful one than his. And this is the thing I love about Trump. He always gets everything in. And my button works! Exclamation point.
Trump did not write this entire tweet. There's a few words that give it away. Please, he doesn't say please inform someone. He would never say that.
Mm-hmm.
280 characters is what
you think
this is what that's born.
What is it? What is it?
280 characters. This is the natural consequence of 280
Way
characters.
too many characters. So do you think, wait, you're saying that this is General Kelly?
I'm saying it worries me because I don't think this is just Trump freelancing.
Well, this is the thing that people need to know, that there's no doubt that, like, especially with these threats to North Korea, that McMaster and Kelly are completely on board with this. And this should, if we want to be serious for a second, this should totally belie the narrative that, like, you know, he's just crazy. And these militarists who are veterans in the military industrial complex, and in some cases absolutely personally complicit in crimes against humanity, that they're the ones that are holding him back from potential recklessness. I mean, they might be in certain things because he's totally mentally unstable, but like a policy like instigating against North Korea is quite at home in the hawkish circles of Washington.
A tweet that said we're going to reroute funds for the F-18 or whatever, F-35 to just kids that need food to go to school would not make it through.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't know. What do you make of this?
The most depraved part of this is the part where he treats the real humanitarian crisis and starvation of actual human people as a punchline to show that he's like a better, like, Americans are fatter, so we're better, and like completely glossing.
It's literally what he's saying.
Like, that's just like raw depravity. Also, that he capitalizes button.
Well, it's a thing.
There is going to be some sort of like grad student in literary studies that does like a analysis of Trump's punctuation and capitalization.
I love all the
interesting stuff.
It does. I think it would be great if we had like an accurate translation of Kim Jong-un and it actually did sound like Trump. Like his Korean was actually like, I fed my uncle to a dog and it was tough stuff, but everyone said it. And everyone said it needed to happen.
And then it turns out that Kim Jong-il sounds exactly like Fred Trump.
It's just like, my dad was very tough. Very tough. Don't get to found North Korea without being tough. But also a great...
educated in like Switzerland or something?
Yeah, he did. He went to prep school in Switzerland. Yep. And
so he probably sounds like Eric Skarsgård or something. I don't know. Where's Eric Skarsgård from?
I don't I don't know. I don't think he's
Norway?
from Switzerland. Yeah,
I don't know.
He's like, my button works. I assure you. No, but I think there is a weird. I remember in the campaign, one of the funniest things that Trump said, which in retrospect I guess isn't as funny, but at the time I did laugh, was I forget what the context was, but he was essentially like clearly like super impressed that you could be this young and like be such an ass. Like he was just sort of like, I mean, it's pretty ruthless what he's done, but I mean, that's a young guy. Like he just totally took, like he's only 34 years old and he totally locked that place down. Like, so I think what's particularly sick about this dynamic, if you want to take it at a personality level, is like, it's definitely like two, it's two sociopath trust fund babies like talking to each other. I mean, it's really, and the only thing that I will say, like, and I'm terrified this is happening, and this is a reckless and horrific way of doing foreign policy, and also like not in any way to excuse North Korea as a regime. They're horrific. There's also like certain objective realities that don't get presented in U.S. press. Like they are surrounded by a ring of U.S. troop presence. We have threatened them with nukes many times. Like their response is not like justified. The treatment of their people is obscene, but it doesn't just like happen in a vacuum. This isn't like an Austin Powers, James Bond character. Like this is an actual global situation. But I do wonder, I mean, if the calculation is in North Korea that like, and there's a lot of miscommunication between these regimes. It's really dangerous. But like my understanding has been that in the past, there always was some North Korean understanding that like when it really comes down to it, like even Bush, like the most bellicose, like and undermining of diplomacy, like they're not actually going to do this just even because of what would happen to Seoul alone. And I really wonder like, what's the calculation when they're sort of like, hey, we're supposed to play the crazy guy role. And like, oh, this guy is fucking crazy.
A lot of people were saying when Trump was elected that now we're all really reliant on the maturity and integrity of Kim Jong-un
right,
to
right.
like keep like
like,
the
seriously.
world together. Like, I think that's right, and I think that holds.
Yeah.
And I'm fairly comfortable with it as compared to how comfortable I am with Donald Trump. If I had to give both buttons to one person, it'd be a hard choice.
Wow. Well, I definitely don't think black girls are magical. Black girls are totally unfair. All right, some questions from the Discord. Would you consider doing an illicit history with Bill Fletcher on why Major League Baseball integrated? Yes, I absolutely would. Bree, can you provide a Verret code for when Peter Dow weaponizes his wife's identity?
It's that boobless from your calculator, your TI-84.
What?
It's whatever that is. You're like 5'5", 3,
what is this?
7.
I
have no idea.
Yeah, 553780008.
And what does it do?
When you type that on your TI-87 calculator, or TI-84, whatever, and
it put it upside down. It says boobless.
Oh, nice. Okay, great. So that's the Verret code. Does Verret still exist?
I believe so. He still talks about it a lot.
I talked to somebody once who knows like some tech stuff, and what was like that actually cost a lot of money to make.
Yeah,
like it's just amazing.
It could have been.
You really shouldn't criticize it because his wife, a woman of color. This is literally a tweet. One of his like,
this
most
was recent,
popular
right?
tweets. Like his wife, a woman of color, was instrumental in getting this off the ground. And so by criticizing Verret, you are thereby criticizing her and revealing yourself to be a dyed-in-the-wool racist.
Wow. Well, shit. Fucking Jill Stein and Reddit. I am just so problematic tonight here. Yeah.
Mediocrity. Just this white mediocrity. So disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, yeah, I mean, Verret really is. These jokes get cliched, but that literally is like a '90s Def Comedy Jam come to life. Like, what other imagination could Verret come from? Other than like the recesses of like that perfect fusion of like truly aggrieved and emotionally unstable, but also utterly entitled and mediocre, that I will concede that only it is a unique pathology of the middle-class white man. I mean, it's a special thing.
Hillary Clinton vetted that one. She retweeted it and threw her support behind Barrett. So,
but I did feel like I've started to realize and there's a question about Ta-Nehisi in a second that I'm going to get to you, and I have like substantive criticisms of Ta-Nehisi, and I've liked your criticisms, and I liked Cornel West.
I heard you on Champagne Sharks the other day.
Yeah, but I also would concede, and I think I did say it on Champagne Sharks, and I said it on this show too, that like I in a lot of ways have a bigger problem with his followers than him.
Sure.
And I've started to feel it's like I think Hillary Clinton did vet it, Verrett, because like, oh, right, I didn't mention this lunatic in my book. Like, here's a tweet. Like, I've started to feel more like, Hillary's just a tough old broad. Like, she's got a lot of flaws. It didn't work. It's kind of depressing.
Yeah,
I really feel bad that she didn't win. Honestly, like, not for the public, but on some level,
like a human level.
I read it as, look, you could have been the first woman president and you lost to this like totally overt misogynist. I think that is like genuinely really tragic.
Yeah,
I really do.
I agree.
And she's crazy, but she's more justifiably crazy than her fans, because at least it's her life. Like, at least when she goes on these like endless rants, it actually personally affected her,
Yeah, I genuinely think her brain was broken by like years of right wing.
Yes.
That made her unable to distinguish between like right wing nonsense and actual good faith critique.
Sure. I will say
Sure.
she's less accountable. She's less annoying than her people. But I also do think that like she did not have to be broken in that way. Like, that's not an inevitability of her circumstances. And that there's a certain amount of the fact that I think she insulated herself and walled herself off and surrounded herself with yes men that made it so that she was able to be broken in that way.
There's no doubt about that. And I mean, I say this point all the time. I totally have differences with Obama, but if you listen to, Cricket Media, which like actually is really stupid in a lot of ways, you can tell that, like, if you met like David Axelrod, Valerie Jarrett, John Favreau, you'd have all sorts of disagreements, all sorts of blah, 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 but you would still have some of like, all right, like these are normal people. And Hillary Clinton's like circle is of like deeply damaged weirdos. And that clear, like,
actually, there was a really good
that reflects very poorly on both Clintons.
There was a profile of Adam Parkamenko or whatever.
That guy, right.
He's a weirdo, man. I'll see if I can try to find this.
Dude, please. I mean, they're really like. I actually think like Bill had his like, Carville Bagala thing, which I get. Like, that's kind of like, okay, like some good like Southern good old boy sort of like whatever, and that kind of fits. But then you look at like, I mean, even people that people don't talk about anymore. Lonnie Davis. I mean, like, what normal human being would want that in their orbit? And you look at the Obama people and criticize them all day, but they're not. There is some weird, just like human level difference there. Like, who the fuck do you?
Yeah.
What is this? Oh, you want to read that?
Part of it is
this is Parmashenko speaking.
Yeah, can you move your head, David, so I can read this? Part of it is a family component, Parkamenko said. When you're 17, 18, 19, and getting a call from Hillary Clinton on your birthday, she takes on a role of mom away from home. She was always asking me how little things were going with my degree and why I hadn't finished it. She really cares.
This is the guy who sorted her mail for all those years?
Did he? I don't know.
There was that profile of that guy who was like, for a long time.
Mail.
No, he like he like writes all her letters for her. Yeah. That guy.
He could be some type. I think
he was the ready for Hillary guy.
He was ready for Hillary. He had some
youngish.
type of pack. He's youngish. Yeah.
He's like our age.
Right. He
was young like 15 years ago.
Okay. Right, but you know what it is? He's young enough that it's totally weird how he's chosen to spend his life and his interests, and he's old enough that it's absolutely emotionally devastating that he's put all this time into it. That's what he is.
Here's some more. After the 2008 election, Parkamenko said, I thought I would be done with politics. At 22, he decided to go through the police academy. He had long been interested in law enforcement, and he grew an extra appreciation for the work after watching Hillary Clinton's security team on the trail. After graduating, he got a badge and a gun and worked 20 to 30 hours a month on patrol as an unpaid volunteer.
See, what I think of this, though, is I think, like, thank God he likes Hillary so much, or we'd have another George Zimmerman.
He still might. We still might if the firewall doesn't keep in line.
Yeah, very. Okay, Bree, what would you say to Ta-Nehisi Coates to get him back on Twitter, and any other thoughts you might have about West and Coates?
So I actually ended up writing him the day he went off Twitter, like before he went off. He was kind enough and open enough to reach out to me after my
cool.
piece. And I had been negligent in writing him back and happened to have decided to, like, I saw there, all the Twitter flutter about him that day made me remember and, like, sent off an email. And then he went off Twitter and I felt really guilty about it. But I guess my hope is always that he comes into the fold. Like, I think he's perfectly capable, and, like, I think his actual politics are at least superficially good as he articulates them outside of what he's written.
Right.
And that's reflected in his choice to vote for Bernie Sanders, even though there was all that weirdness about not wanting to, like, say it was an endorsement and all that.
Oh, right.
My issue, what I think the big schism is with Ta-Nehisi Coates is that he does not see himself as a political being. And he says this explicitly a lot, not just to me, but in other interviews and stuff, that he doesn't think that his role is to speak to messaging or talk about what will actually work politically, or to say, to really consider how his words are going to be used in politics.
Right.
Which I think is frankly deeply naive.
I agree.
And setting oneself up to be a destructive influence.
Right.
And I think that no matter what he says, it's going to be politicized and adopted by whomever's interest it suits. And I think that if it is true that he shares the leftist politics, that he needs to be a lot more conscientious of the ways in which his one-sided critiques of class and kind of apolitical application of a historical narrative to contemporary events. Not that an application of historical narrative that kind of, like, ignores huge other pieces of the puzzle is actually destructive. Because I don't think he actually disagrees in principle. He just refuses to put the things that he's saying, which are true, in broader context. The things that he writes about the ways that race affects contemporary America aren't untrue.
Right.
And that's why they have so much persuasive weight. And that's why so many people who disagree with him fall in the trap of saying something that's, like, racist or, like, irritating to black people.
Right.
You don't have to deny the reality of his historical narrative to disagree with his political argument, because the political argument is weak in and of itself because it's just incomplete. And so I would push him to complete it by using the same historical approach that he uses with respect to race to talk about the history of class movements and, like, black Marxism in America, and write something that I think would be deeply compelling and transformative potentially in the ways in which black Americans see themselves politically, and perhaps open them up dramatically to the kinds of things that Bernie Sanders is saying.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny, when I was talking with Bill Fletcher Jr. earlier, I was thinking the whole time of, like, this is where, like, it would be amazing if Ta-Nehisi Coates headed in this type of direction of, like, real synthesis and political sophistication. But the thing that struck me recently, and to be really clear, and everybody who's listened to this, because this was on a Postgame a couple weeks ago, or actually the last Postgame of 2017, Adam Proctor of Dead Pundits, friend of the show, and was here in studio, and he quoted from an interview that Ta-Nehisi gave recently, where Ta-Nehisi said something to the effect of, like, I've started to read political economy, and it's starting to strike me. And again, like, in some ways, this kind of moral actor way of looking at politics is, even beyond our argument earlier, is honestly just, like, it's really not how I look at politics. It's very foreign to me in some ways. But he said, it seemed to me that he's like, I don't think you could be president and be a good person. And first part of it was honestly, like, and we dinged him, like, wow, like, how the fuck can you be such a, like, educated, successful, sophisticated person and, like, you read a fucking Noam Chomsky booklet when you're 14 and you should be familiar with that analysis. But on the more charitable and more relevant side, it's, like, awesome. Like, Ta-Nehisi Coates is reading political economy. His next books might be really good.
I think they might be.
Yeah.
I get that impression. It's disappointing that it couldn't have happened in 2016. I mean, like,
Yeah,
I remember
agree.
I wrote him like in spring of 2016 when I had like 200 Twitter followers, and I asked him, you know, I saw that he was supporting Bernie Sanders. I said, please, Mr. Coates, if you could just write an article that, you know, explain to people why you supported him. And because we were in the midst of all of the, if you vote for Sanders, you're a racist business.
Right.
You know, it would mean so much. And he, you know, replied, I can't write everything. You write it.
And I remember
That's
you
why I'm
said
here
that, which is good. So thank you, Ta-Nehisi Coates. But that actually is part of what, like, people ask me how you can justify calling people said explicitly, like, that Cornel West is wrong, and by extension me, because I've agreed basically with Cornel West's critique of Ta-Nehisi Coates, minus some of the, you know, just sort of polemics, which I'm not going to co-sign on, and I don't think are really necessary. But I think the broader critique is true.
Sure, me too.
And I think that people have said, well, actually, in this case, they're saying, if you support reparations, you can't be a neoliberal, which I don't agree with. There's broader sort of policy sets. But I think the biggest reason, actually, in some ways, that I do kind of classify Ta-Nehisi as the way I would use neoliberal in some ways, and was very reflective in how he talked about the primary, because he had a lot of like you're saying, not acknowledging that the reality of his role is that he is politically influential. So you can, you know, it's like, I don't know, like Steph Curry can say, I'm not an athlete, I'm a basketball player. Like, okay, if that helps you in your head, but you are, that's reality. And then by extension, if that is reality, then I just can't get with, like, I got to write what I feel and what I'm moved by. Well, your political intervention in the primary was giving ammunition to the right-wing reactionary candidates. Like, that was what you did.
Yeah.
And I don't care about how you morally, personally felt about it.
Yeah.
And I find his trope of that, and I'll be specific, that individualistic way of privileging self-expression over material effects, I just fundamentally disagree with, no matter who's doing it. And he's done a lot of it.
Yeah. Back to the trolley problem that we opened with, like his inaction or his lack of political commitment has moral implications as well as any more affirmative stance would have.
Right. Don't worry, I won't. I'm curious about this question too. Bree, what is the Green Party's position on public sector unions and collective bargaining? I assume it's probably good, right?
Probably. I don't know. What am I, Jill Stein?
No, you would never be on the show if you were Jill Stein. You think Jill Stein would be crew? Get the fuck out of here.
You wouldn't have Jill Stein on?
I wouldn't have her be crew.
Okay.
I wouldn't. You know what I would like to? I'd like to stage if she would play herself in a sketch where I was a Russian and she read the lines I fed her.
She'd probably be game.
She probably would be. You know, fun fact: the first person I ever voted for was Jill Stein.
So
she ran for governor of Massachusetts. It was the first time I could vote. It was like 2003 or something.
Maybe
and
I'm
I
not supposed
voted
to
for
say
her.
this, but her people reached out to me about.
I'm sure they did.
Making her available for an interview.
I'm sure they did.
But I couldn't decide what I wanted to write. Like I couldn't. Like what's the point? Like I was just mad about
honestly,
the East Pace.
I mean, honestly, what's the point? Like what? I mean, look, I think like. Again, this is just not even a judgment of her one way or another. Like, if they have to come up with a different strategy, I don't think that's. I mean, they have to run many more local candidates, and they need to figure out if they're going to do a presidential thing, they got to do somebody else.
Sure, and I hope that everybody helps them in that goal by voting Green Party if you're in a red or blue state.
I could, on some level. Look, I was right there. I forget what she said. She said something so stupid in the summer that I flipped.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matters to me. That's
really,
where
and Hillary Clinton hasn't said a million stupid things and done a million worse stupid deeds.
That's
harmful,
that's a
destructive,
fair point.
murderous
That's a fair
deeds.
Point. That is a totally fair point. Okay, let's take a few more calls. You are calling from a 617 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Oh, is this me?
This is you.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah, hi. Greetings from the, well, not sunny, but balmy Dnipro, where it is well over freezing at 5 in the morning. Yeah, hi.
It's not that different from New York.
Oh, no, it's like well over freezing. I thought it's like...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
You're winning.
I'm angry. I'm triggered.
What's that?
I'm triggered.
That's a banned word on this show. It's part of my new brocialist problematic stance.
I said triggered.
No, I know. Triggered is not... I don't like that word. Triggered's out. Triggered triggers me.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm done
All
with
right,
it.
well,
All of that, all SJW verbiage is banned from this show.
Okay, Sargon.
Yeah,
fuck it up.
I was so upset when
and
I
that-
was a socialist and I found out I couldn't kill girls in video games anymore, and it started my modern political project. Sorry, go ahead. What's your thought?
Jealous that you don't need a giant coat, that you do need a giant coat to go around in the streets there,
Yes.
unlike here.
That's good.
Okay, well, real fast, yes, I think I voted for Jill Stein in 2002 as soon as I could as well, because, what's his name? Robert Rice didn't get the nomination. Boo-hoo, I worked on his campaign then, 18 years old.
Wow.
And my main reason for not voting for Jill Stein last year was basically her track record or like scorched earth record with Greenpeace Russia, who I've I volunteered with a bunch in the past. So
Wait, can you explain that? I don't know anything about that. Will you explain that, please?
Well, no, actually, it was, lack thereof, basically just that kind of saying like like environmental hypocrite in terms of kind of ignoring the piss poor environmental policies of a very large petrostate, but still compared to other petrostates, not, well, certainly no semblance of a democracy, but has been more options in the past. I mean, hell, I was even out in the streets protesting against the Sochi Olympics. I mean, for
Right.
good that did.
The Sochi Olympics, when Russia did, not only the Sochi Olympics had huge environmental impact. There was actually like they killed endangered species, and they did a lot of that. Was very harmful. Yeah. Okay.
Did you vote?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was gonna say just about like your Jordan Peterson thing. I know folks that are like kind of halfway into that. What would your like quick and dirty analysis be on, I don't know, rehabilitation?
Well, it depends how deep they're into it, but I like the simplest point I make, and I don't, if I cared to, like, which I don't, I could get into like why he's wrong on like the merits of his own terms. Like, I think his weird kind of fusion of like evolutionary biology determinism mixed with like Jungian pop psychology is very weird. But I think that like the biggest point that I would make, and I've made this actually to a lot of people, this has been a thing that I've been using that I found somewhat effective with some libertarians who aren't completely insane. So you're telling me these people aren't completely insane. That there are ideas and theories that might be like Lean In. It's like if Lean In was just framed as like a self-help book for how like somebody dealing with sexism in a Fortune 500 operated, cool. But applied to a macroeconomic political theory, it's super problematic. So I guess I would say like if watching Jordan Peterson helps you, I don't know, if you found his like self-help stuff helpful, cool. But you can do it. Yeah, you can do it. But as a political project, it's super delusional. So I feel like that might be a way of saying it. Then the other thing, if you want to get deeper into it, it's like this whole thing that like all Marxist governments have caused all this harm. You can also say that like the roots of Marxist governance is also like the German Social Democratic Party and like trade unionism and that's number one.
Empire.
And also, what did you say?
I mean, the word empire should probably come up instead of Marxist governments, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then I think on the flip side, if you want to really keep it at their level, you can also say like, well, technically there are quote unquote liberal governments which arise from like, I don't know, John Locke that have also like collectively killed millions of people and engaged in colonialism and imperialism. So like, let's like set aside like supposedly this system is the result of this individual philosopher and get to like actual real things. And I think if you're dealing with somebody who's like somewhat reality based, they'll respond to that. And if not, then they're going to be in the cold.
Yeah, it's motherload of bad ideas fundamentalism, like Sam Harris with Islam, to say it's the fundamental to Marx or something.
Last point on that is like your Jordan Peterson always cracks me up but you should still be going more for Kermit the Frog. Put your tongue further back in your mouth when you do it.
My voice is too deep.
I'm never going to let you die on these impressions.
All right. I appreciate it. Always appreciate the feedback. Psych. No, thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Do you know Jordan Peterson?
Mm-mm.
He's sort of like the soft alt-right kind of like drama queen of the moment. He's one of these guys. He's a psychology professor in Canada. And there's some directive in Canada that essentially says that if you have a job like that in the public sector, you need to respect the gender identity of your students. So if somebody identifies in these various categories, and he had this giant, like, honestly, like, just deep emotional meltdown about this because it's not real and you're forcing me to use language that isn't real, which he, as many other like mental cases, has leveraged to like an enormously successful side hustle. He's one of the most popular patrons in the country. He's got a big YouTube channel, and but I guess it's like in and of itself, he's worthy of like confronting because he's definitely bringing in a lot of young people. But I think also he's an example of he's like an example of like one of those Angela Nagel things where it's like definitely like the excess and certain parts of like an incredibly like dumb, hyper language focused, performative college and Twitter quote unquote social justice culture has totally left him this like massive lane to like essentially just like extrapolate giant crazy conclusions from his own experiences, some of which he's just bigoted and obnoxious. Other times he's actually probably encountering things that are a problem, and then he's just like, you know. So he's part of this like anti-SJW cottage industry that you find actually much less. It's a YouTube thing, much more than a podcasting thing. You're calling from a 612 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
This is Ken. Calling from the Home Depot.
This is Ken?
Ken Langone.
Ken?
Hey.
What the fuck? Jesus. Okay. That's a deep cut right here.
I wanted to talk about the tax bill.
Okay. Sure you do.
I'm just really heartened by the fact that now the WIC program's funding's been cut. And I've got more money, and I can use it to get high.
Wait a second. Mr. Langone, you had said that one of the reasons that we needed to be careful about food stamps was that apparently people were using food stamps to buy drugs. And now you're suggesting that you're going to use your tax cut to quote-unquote get high?
It's my money, okay? I will not be told what to do with my earnings.
You're also
I told people to work so I could get this money while I sit and complain.
You're also
state the truth.
You're squandering the huge amounts of money that have been allotted for the opiate problem, which I think amounts to 2 cents per every addict.
Your squander is my spliff, if I may be frank.
Once again, I have to say, if Ken Langone was like this in public, I would be far more sympathetic to Ken Langone. I'd be like, look, Ken Langone, of course, needs to be put in a gulag, but he's a charming old prick. But instead, most of his media appearances are like, I really worry about food stamps because they use it for drugs. And you just like, shut the fuck up, you disgusting old...
Fuck you, I'm leaving.
There's no doubt that my show has like the crown for most bizarre non sequitur. Like that's like we probably did a segment like a year and a half ago on Majority Report on Ken Langone, and this guy's like, you know what? January 2018, I'm coming through with the fucking Langone pothead impression. That's amazing. I hope that Steven Seagal will call back when we hit 5,000 patrons. I will, of course, be singing Steven Seagal's reggae song. And this time, even though I'm, very sore about our Jill Stein dispute, I still am so happy to have you in that I am not going to play the Lady Saw Steven Seagal song. I'm going to play it for you next time.
Not only can you play it, I'll back you up on ukulele.
Done. 5,000 patrons. Attorney Andrew, trying to clarify something about the debate between Bree and Mike. Is the debate Jill Stein good or bad? Or is it that Jill Stein's campaign was good or bad from the start? I think that there is some confusing
I think it's a little
here.
even different than that. I think it's about defining what the goals of the campaign are.
Wait, I think he might be getting that. Or is that by November 2016, she did not warrant a vote for president, given the implications of Trump winning? I think it's, finally, Bree, are you writing a book? Because you should. I would tend to, I think that it's some fusion of all three, but I guess we could have more specifically specified our terms. What do you think?
Yeah, I think to the last point, especially because this is what she started to say toward the end when it became increasingly close between Hillary and Donald, was that she was focusing on getting voters from blue states and red states, right? And I think that since there was zero risk from someone, from New York, for instance, voting for Jill Stein, or someone in Texas voting for Jill Stein, the third one's a no-brainer, that everyone should have done it, because your vote literally doesn't matter if you're voting in a blue state or a red state, unless you're voting for a Green Party candidate to get them to funding. That's something that matters. That's something that has an actual result.
I guess I have to confess that by the end, it wasn't just that I mean, personally, I'm not going to lie. It totally was. I didn't like her and all. Like, I was really put off by and we can do it again some other time. But I also, in the sense of using my vote by the end, and this also wasn't just her. It was like guys like David Cobb, and seeing them interviewed. It was just like, I don't know. Like, I wasn't convinced about. I was really ambivalent about them even getting that 5%. To be honest with you, it was just like these people are fucking disaster.
You voted in New York.
Well, I wasn't sure I really wanted them to get it, if I'm being really honest. Like, but on the other hand, if they got it, then they would be professionalized and they've higher quality people. I get it. I understand.
Instead, you gave your vote to Mother.
Mother on the working families ticket, though.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I'm supposed to be writing a book, but I'm not doing it because I'm busy.
Yeah,
but I'm trying.
That is a story of so many of our lives. I also think, I don't know what kind of normie liberal bullshit it was, but there was a part of me that did have I had zero, I was 100% Bernie. I don't like Hillary Clinton, but I have to say, I think it was my grandmother, who actually, in fact, ended up supporting Bernie. But she did have this, I'd like to have a woman president before I die. And on that day, I also had just some sense of, you know what? Let me just fucking throw a vote to, it was pure symbolism, too. That was absolutely a part of my vote. And I totally own that.
For me, too.
For her to be the first female candidate to spoil a national campaign. Come on.
That joke
stop being so earnest. Stop it. It's the patron game.
Okay.
Stop it.
People think it's real. People think that's real.
It was funny. That's the only real I care about. Attorney Andrew, remember when Patricia Arquette made an Oscar speech about how women fought for people of color and gay people, and now it was their turn to fight for women? That was some shit.
I do remember that.
Wait, that's the same person?
Yep.
Yo. I love
the greatest hits.
You know what Twitter proves every day is that money and success absolutely don't equal happiness or mental stability. It's really it is extraordinary.
It's even worse than that. She's the one that a week before all of this hot dog business was saying, "Oh, I've heard that Bernie Sanders has sexually assaulted people."
Are you fucking
She's
serious?
that one. And then people were like, okay, well, this is serious. If true,
can you
tell us who the people are?
Blocked from Twitter.
Can you
for
tell
doing
us? And she was like, oh, just people.
That's disgusting.
Correct.
That's disgusting. And it's funny. I'm the ultimate cynic, but I don't even think I wouldn't spread that rumor about a Republican. I don't that's
it's unethical.
But I'm just saying I have no problem in politics with bending ethical lines. But even for me, no, that is just so clearly purely unethical, across the board. Even for I actually did see that tweet that's some one of these crazy
Briahna?
Russia Hillary.
It was Briahna who was like, let's get some girls together to accuse Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. Hopefully we just need a handful of women to say that he put their hands, which ironically is also, there's an unintentional critique of some of the ways that Me Too went in their tweet as well, and also a total, of course, like massive cheapening of misogyny and sexual assault. It was so disgusting.
They're duking us. It was going to make it worse for all of us.
Right.
I think it's going to be the subject of our first episode of Swoti Podcast in the new year, by the way.
Oh, awesome. That's going to be a really good show. Okay, Lewis from Texas. Happy New Year, guys. May this year quickly get better because our idiot large adult son president is already igniting World War III. No doubt. So question for Brie. Would she encourage Jill Stein to run again in 2020? Also, congrats on being blocked by Peter Dow. I thought you weren't blocked yet.
Did he block me since I left work?
That's very possible. His woman of color wife might have given him the go-ahead.
Yeah, when I left at like 7:20 to head over here, I was not blocked. If I am now blocked, then I'm a part of a really beautiful club of people. So thanks.
I feel like I have not been blocked by Peter Dow, but I think the fact that I literally added my poll at him is probably going to get me blocked. Like, I'm probably going from I was super gentle on Peter and he had no grounds to block me to like I went at him pretty central there.
See, I haven't. I've tried that with Patricia Arquette. The reason I got a lot of like traction from that was I tried to be very respectful to her and engage her seriously, because I feel like if someone has a huge platform, it's worth it to take the time to try to shepherd them along and make them understand. So if he's blocked me, it's really not because I've been a dick. Like, I've been very careful not to like particularly dickish comments toward him. Right. Like, I've been playing it straight.
Isn't that typically your strategy?
Yeah,
with
Brie
Twitter
is very all strap up.
Yeah.
Brie is very like she does a lot of like Machiavellian shit with these people. She's very art of war with like dumb center Twitter.
It depends. I'm not always as patient as I'd like to be, but I try.
We had even somebody, you were going at it with somebody that said something so dumb that even I got in on it. And it was something like, I don't remember what it was, but there are people that you engage with that are so like extravagantly stupid that like they want a world where like we're going to be like heading into like fucking like futuristic, like, Google, Amazon, like worker camps, and all of our rights have been stripped away, and they want to be like at the door being like, I thought that was problematic what you said when you were like, oh yeah, well thanks a lot, Bernie Sanders. Like you engage with people that I think who are just fundamentally like they're just dunzo. Like they're brain dead.
Some of them are the worst, but I try not to stick with people unless there's a reason. Like there's an audience of people who I think are persuadable, or there's somebody who actually just has a big platform.
Okay, so that's because Patricia Arquette is an idiot.
Yeah, and
but
she
has
says
a
she
big
voted
platform.
for Bernie, and she like believes in the abstract and all the things.
She believes in the abstract and all the things. Okay, bad person in Michigan. This is a weird self-negating title. Jill Stein did not do the job. She didn't run a campaign to build a party for the future. That's what she needed to do. She didn't run a campaign to win. She should have campaigned that was serious, thoughtful, and presidential. So in 2020 and 2024, the party would seem like a potential. She failed as much as HRC did in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And my wife is a person of color and says I'm right.
That I'd say you could swap out Jill Stein for Bernie Sanders and see the exact same criticism on the internet. I'm not saying it's fair for either, but I'm saying that you have to be conscious of that reality when you're making that criticism. And that's why I think looking at what the objectives of these campaigns were and kind of like modulating what your expectations were accordingly is important. Like obviously if she were the Democratic candidate, I would have a lot of issues with her kind of what is Aleppo moments. But the reality is that she's not, and neither was
what is Aleppo guy? Right.
So like I wasn't even mad at him about that, because like that's not his job.
I'm mad at him about being a libertarian, which is like the worst thing you can be.
But that's consistent with not knowing where Aleppo is.
That's right. Why would you know?
Or what Aleppo is?
He should have said, I don't care because I don't care who dies there. I've got like prisons to privatize here. That's what he should have said.
It's on brand.
Exactly. It's on brand. I would just say be aware of flattening. Bullprog. So I've spent the last couple of weeks exploring the Sargon sector of YouTube, and a lot of the discussions are dominated by a spectrum of right-wing commentators. The latest trending topic has been race realism, with half-wit con artists pushing the bull curve like data to 14 to 30 something men. Yeah. This guy, Andy Warzicki, has been hosting free-form debates, discussions, and he's looking for people to oppose Richard Spencer this Thursday evening. It's a big ask because these events can be mind-numbingly frustrating, but would Michael be interested in throwing down? I only bring it up because Andy's channel seems to be getting more popular, and it could be an opportunity to inject new ideas. That's something that I'm going to have to really start thinking. I've gotten several. I don't know if I would ever do something with Richard Spencer, but in general, the only reason, if I'm being really brutally honest, I'm opposed to the idea is that I did do a debate with Sarkon. I have debated with these types of people and dealt with them. And they make Eric Garland look like a paragon of mental stability. So the fallout of talking to these people in terms of Twitter nonsense is just honestly exhausting and a major time waste. But you can follow up with me on that. I would be open to doing things like that because I think it is, even in the worst of circumstances, I think it's important that representations of our brand be out there. I think that matters.
I like the idea of those kinds of debates.
Yeah.
But what I also like is the idea of going into them with a kind of set universe of knowledge. So can we agree that these are the papers that you're relying on? These are the ones that I'm relying on. We have an opportunity to do research and actually show whether or not they're correct, vetted by the field, all those other kinds of things. So we're not just having these bizarro conversations like Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. Oh, there's no hate crimes aren't up, and a whirlwind of factlessness.
Yeah, and I have to say, as much as I loathe Spencer, I think Spencer might be able to deal with something like that. I think a lot of these other people, as soon as you said what are our predetermined sources, they'd run away with their tails between their legs. I think they're mostly total nothings, and I think that we also have to. But I think the way they're framing it on popular media is that it's them with the hard science and then a bunch of idiot people who only care about feelings and not reality and blah blah blah, and they have their ammunition of cringe videos and whatever, and it's a effective brand proposition. So I think people with a real radical socialist, ethical and empirical and persuasive personas need to start engaging in those spaces, because we need to, if there's 5% of those 14 and 30 somethings to pick off, I think we ought to do it. So yeah. Ron Reagan, who let the dogs out? That's all he's got.
It's classic.
And the final IM of this postgame, the first postgame of 2018. Bree, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to the whole team. Hillary Clinton, Machiavelli, Sun Tzu. Michael, you better watch your fucking back if you're going to keep talking about my man Ezra. On Sunday, Gene Bajlan and I on the illicit history of the Green Movement and what's happening in Iran today. Thank you, each and every one of you. We'll be back soon.